She messaged after a year gone, I had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again. Then turned pale when she saw who answered my door. I never thought the day my wife walked back into my life would be the day I finally felt free. But the look on her face when she saw who opened my door. That was worth every single sleepless night. See, to understand that moment, you need to go back. Back to a freezing morning almost a year before, standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, my world absolutely silent. My wife of 26 years, Victoria, had just vanished. Like she was never even here. The only thing she left behind was a sticky note on the bathroom mirror, I need to find myself. Don't wait up. With a smiley face. Like it was some kind of joke. Her closet was empty. All her toiletries, gone. And when I checked our joint accounts, because something just felt so wrong, $80,000 had been transferred out 3 days earlier, to an account I'd never seen. I stood there, refreshing the bank app, like the numbers might magically reappear. They didn't. That's when the real panic set in. This wasn't a weekend trip. This wasn't a girl's vacation. This was something else entirely. My name is Daniel Miller, I'm 50 years old. I'd spent the last 2 decades building a small chain of car washes across the suburbs, steady, reliable work that had given us a comfortable life. I honestly thought we had a stable marriage, even if the passion had faded. That first day, I must have called her cell phone 40 times. Left voicemails that went from worried to confused, then angry, then just desperate. Every single call went straight to voicemail. By day 2, her phone wasn't just off, it was disconnected completely. I drove to her office downtown, walked past security like I belonged. When I found her supervisor, she gave me this incredibly awkward look and said Victoria had requested an indefinite leave of absence about a week ago. Said it was personal. That's when it hit me. Victoria had planned this. She'd orchestrated her entire disappearance. And I, her husband, was apparently the very last person to know. Our kids, Liam, who's 27 and works in finance, and Chloe, 25, an elementary school teacher, both refused to look me in the eye when I called them. And when I pressed Liam about whether he knew anything, he just snapped at me, just give Mom some space. You're making this worse. And that's when it dawned on me. My own children were in on this. They knew she was leaving. And nobody, not a single one of them, thought to give me a heads up. The house felt like a tomb after that. Every room echoing with memories of a life I thought we'd built together. Photos on the walls of vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, they suddenly felt like lies. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Just wandered from room to room, desperate to figure out what I'd done wrong. I took a week off work, leaving my assistant manager in charge of the car washes. Told him I had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie. I spent most of that time sitting on the couch, staring at nothing, my brain trying to piece together the previous months for any signs I'd missed. Had she been unhappy? Was there someone else? Did I work too much? Was I a bad husband? The questions just looped, endlessly, with no answers. The worst part? The silence. Because at least if she'd yelled at me, or told me she hated me, I'd have something to work with. But this vanishing act? It left me with absolutely nothing. My business partners called, genuinely concerned. I'd always been the reliable one, the guy who showed up early and stayed late. I had to tell them I didn't know when I'd be back to normal, because honestly, I didn't know if there was a normal to get back to. It was around week 3 when I first noticed my new neighbor, Sarah Jenkins. She'd moved in 2 doors down about a month before everything fell apart. I'd seen her a few times coming home from night shifts at the hospital, still in her scrubs, looking exhausted. We'd exchanged polite waves, the kind of neighbor interactions that don't really mean anything. But one afternoon, she knocked on my door, holding a plate of chocolate chip cookies, slightly burned around the edges. She just smiled and said, I made too many. Thought you might want some. That genuine smile was the first real human warmth I'd felt in weeks. I invited her in, mostly because I didn't want to be rude. We ended up talking for 2 hours about nothing important, just normal conversation about the neighborhood, the weather, her job in the ICU. And when she left, it struck me, I'd laughed. For the first time since Victoria disappeared. Sarah started checking in on me after that. Nothing pushy, nothing romantic. Just friendly visits that broke up the crushing loneliness. She had this way of listening that made me feel like I wasn't completely losing my mind over being so hurt and confused. She'd bring coffee sometimes, or we'd sit on my porch, and she'd tell me stories about difficult patients or hospital politics. Slowly, I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. One evening, about a month after Victoria left, Sarah and I were sitting on my back deck, beers in hand, watching the sunset. I'd been telling her the whole story, the disappearance, the money, the kids siding with their mother. She got quiet for a minute, then said, "I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. Here comes another betrayal, I thought. She looked down at her hands. "I was your brother's hospice nurse 3 years ago. I took care of Michael in his final weeks." I just stared at her. My brother had died of cancer, and I'd been with him as much as possible, but there were so many nurses. I didn't remember all their faces. Sarah continued, "He talked about you constantly, showed me photos, told me stories about your life and your car wash business. When I saw you moving into this neighborhood, I recognized you immediately. And I didn't know what to say because it felt too coincidental, too convenient." She must have seen the shock on my face because she quickly added, "I didn't approach you then because it felt weird, like I was some kind of stalker. But then, when I saw you were struggling, I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know you." There was something in her eyes, this vulnerability and honesty, that I desperately needed to believe in. I asked her why she was telling me now. She said, "Because I don't want to start something real with a lie between us." That word, real, hung in the air. A promise of something I didn't even know I wanted anymore. That night, after she left, I sat in my empty house. Victoria's absence felt like a physical presence in every room. And for the first time since that sticky note, I understood, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what might be possible. That terrified me almost as much as it gave me hope. The next few months were like watching myself come back to life in slow motion. Honestly, I didn't even realize it was happening until I caught myself humming while making breakfast one morning and had to stop, because it felt wrong to be happy when Victoria had just abandoned me. Work started going better because I could actually focus again. I opened a 4th location, and my business partners commented that I seemed sharper in meetings, more engaged than I'd been in years. I threw myself into a bunch of home improvement projects I'd been putting off forever, tearing out the old deck and building a new one, repainting the garage, fixing the fence that had been leaning since last winter. Sarah would come over on Wednesday evenings like clockwork. We'd have coffee and talk about our days. On weekends, we started doing normal friend stuff, like hitting up the farmer's market or catching a movie. Nothing that felt like dating, but something comfortable and easy in a way my marriage never was. She never pushed for more or asked intrusive questions about Victoria. Looking back, that patience was exactly what I needed, because I was still processing 26 years of apparently living a lie. It was a Saturday in late spring, about 5 months after Victoria left, when things truly shifted between us. We'd spent the afternoon planting tomatoes and peppers in my backyard garden. Afterward, we were sitting on the porch, drinking beer, dirt still under our fingernails. She told me about her divorce 5 years earlier, how her ex-husband had cheated with someone from his gym, and how she'd spent 2 years thinking she'd never trust anyone again. I opened up about how hollow my marriage had felt toward the end. How Victoria and I had basically been roommates for the last decade, just going through the motions, having the same boring conversations about bills and schedules, but never really connecting about anything that mattered. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. "You deserved better than that," she said. And something in my chest just cracked open. Because nobody had said that to me. Not my kids, not my friends. Nobody had validated that I had a right to feel betrayed and hurt. We kissed that night for the first time, soft and tentative, like teenagers. When she pulled back, she had tears in her eyes and whispered, "I wasn't looking for this." I said, "Me neither." But it felt right in a way nothing had in years. We started actually dating after that. Real dates, where I'd pick her up, even though she lived 2 doors down, and we'd go to nice restaurants or drive out to the coast for the day. I felt like I was discovering what it meant to be with someone who actually wanted to be with me. She'd leave little notes in my truck, stupid things like, "Hope your meeting goes well," with smiley faces. She'd text me random thoughts during her shifts. It was all so simple and genuine that I couldn't believe I'd spent decades with someone who never did any of that. My kids noticed, obviously. Liam called one day, around the 7-month mark, and said, "So, I heard you're seeing someone," in this accusatory tone. I asked him how he'd heard that, and he went silent before admitting, "Mom's been keeping tabs on you." Which was rich, considering Victoria had been gone for 7 months without a single word directly to me. I told Liam that what I did with my life was no longer any of his mother's business. He got defensive. Said I was being cruel, moving on too fast. I had to bite my tongue to keep from screaming that his mother had moved on before she even left. Chloe was slightly better about it when she called a few days later. She at least asked if I was happy. But even she had this edge in her voice, like I was somehow betraying the family by not sitting around waiting for a woman who'd stolen our savings and ghosted her entire life. The real bomb dropped on a Tuesday evening in early September, almost 9 months after Victoria left. Sarah and I were making dinner together in my kitchen. She was chopping vegetables while I worked on the grill outside. She got really quiet, then called me back inside. She was standing there holding a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, her hands shaking. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I know this is complicated. I know we've only been together a few months." I just pulled her into a hug. Complicated or not, this felt like the universe giving me a second chance at something I'd completely messed up the first time around. My kids had been accidents that I loved, but I never really appreciated them the way I should have. I'd been too young, too focused on building the business. But now, at 50, I was financially stable, emotionally present, and genuinely excited in a way I don't think I was even capable of back then. We spent the next few months planning. Sarah gradually moved more of her stuff into my place, because it was bigger and had a yard. I started converting my home office into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow, assembling a crib, imagining what it would be like to raise a child with someone who actually wanted to build a life with me. I told my business partners about the pregnancy, and they were genuinely happy for me. Said they'd noticed how much lighter I seemed lately. It hit me then, I'd been carrying around this weight of an unhappy marriage for so long that I'd forgotten what it was like to just breathe. Sarah was about 4 months along when everything exploded. Her baby bump was just starting to show. We'd started talking about whether to get married before the baby came, or wait until after. Life felt almost surreal, perfect in a way that should have warned me something was about to go wrong. My phone buzzed at 11 on a Thursday night with a text from Victoria's number. I hadn't seen it active in almost a year. The message said, "I've had my fun. Now I'm ready to be a wife again." I stared at it like it was written in a foreign language, because the sheer audacity of that sentence was genuinely incomprehensible. More texts came, rapid fire after that. "I made a mistake, the kids want us back together, this is all up to you now, I'm coming home tomorrow." Like she was announcing a casual visit and not attempting to walk back into a life she'd blown up nearly 12 months ago. I showed Sarah the messages. She went pale. Asked what I was going to do. I told her I was calling my lawyer first thing in the morning, because whatever Victoria thought was going to happen, she was dead wrong. My lawyer, this sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, who'd handled my brother Michael's estate and some business contracts, met with me the next morning. She looked over everything, the bank record showing the $80,000 withdrawal, the timeline of Victoria's disappearance, the complete lack of communication for almost a year. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. "Daniel," she said, "you have an incredibly strong position here. Abandonment, theft, emotional distress, the works." I felt this surge of validation. I'd spent so many months wondering if I was overreacting. I hired a private investigator, too, a former cop named Frank Riley, recommended by Eleanor. Something told me there was more to this story than just Victoria finding herself on some extended soul-searching journey. Frank came back 3 days later with a folder that made my stomach turn. Photos of Victoria with different men over the past year. Credit card receipts from hotels and restaurants in 3 different states. Evidence that she'd been planning this escape for at least 6 months before she actually left, based on her search history and communications her phone company had archived. She hadn't been finding herself. She'd been having an extended affair tour, on our dime. And when the money ran out, and her latest boyfriend in Los Angeles dumped her, suddenly she remembered she had a stable husband with a successful business waiting at home. I sat in my living room, going through Frank's report while Sarah was at work. Looking at photos of my wife of 26 years laughing with strange men, kissing someone in a beach parking lot, walking hand in hand through some downtown I didn't recognize. The weird thing was, I didn't feel angry. Just empty. Like I was looking at a stranger who happened to have Victoria's face. I was still sitting there, the folder open, when someone started pounding on my door early Saturday morning. Aggressive knocking, like the person was trying to break it down. I knew, without looking, who it was. I didn't move. Just sat there, listening to Victoria yell, "Daniel, I know you're in there. We need to talk. You can't ignore me forever." Her voice had an edge of panic I'd never heard before. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, and Sarah appeared. She was wearing my old college t-shirt that hung down to her knees, her baby bump clearly visible now at 4 months. She looked at me with those calm, steady eyes. "Want me to answer it?" she asked. I nodded. Because I genuinely wanted to see Victoria's face when she realized how thoroughly she'd destroyed any chance of coming back. Sarah walked to the door with this calm confidence that I absolutely did not feel. She unlocked it and pulled it open, while I stood behind her where Victoria could see me clearly. The look on my wife's face was worth every sleepless night I'd had over the past year. She froze mid-sentence, her mouth literally hanging open, eyes darting from Sarah to me, to Sarah's visible baby bump, and back again. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually pass out on my porch. Victoria stammered, "Who are you? What is this? What's going on?" Sarah just smiled politely. "I'm his girlfriend, and you need to leave." Then she closed the door in Victoria's face. We could hear Victoria screaming from outside, "You got someone pregnant? Are you insane? We're still married. I'm calling my lawyer." But her voice sounded panicked and desperate, rather than angry. Like she'd just realized she'd miscalculated badly. I filed for divorce that afternoon. Eleanor drew up papers citing abandonment, theft, and marital misconduct. We had everything documented: bank statements, Frank's investigator's report, even testimony from Victoria's former supervisor about the sudden leave of absence and the fact that Victoria had never intended to return to her job. Victoria tried everything to stop it. She called me dozens of times, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to manipulative to outright threatening. She showed up at my house twice more until I got a temporary restraining order. She even tried to turn the kids against me, harder than they already were, by painting herself as the victim of my cruelty. Liam came over with his wife Natalie one evening, about 2 weeks later. Barged in without knocking, which was his first mistake. He immediately started yelling, "How could you do this to Mom? How could you humiliate her like this? She came back and you embarrassed her with some pregnant side piece." That's when I lost it. I told him to sit down and shut up, which shocked him because I'd never spoken to him like that in his entire life. I laid out everything. The $80,000 stolen from our joint accounts. The year of complete abandonment. The multiple affairs Victoria had while she was supposedly finding herself. All of it backed up with documentation I'd kept in a folder specifically for this conversation. Liam's face went red. He tried to argue, she was confused. She made mistakes. You're supposed to forgive. That's what marriage means. I asked him point blank if he and Chloe had been sending their mother money while she was gone. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes told me everything. Natalie, who'd been quiet this whole time, standing by the door with her arms crossed, suddenly said, "Wait, you sent her money? You told me that money was for your student loans." Liam tried to backtrack, but she wasn't having it. She grabbed her purse and walked out. Liam followed her, still trying to explain. I haven't heard from him since, except through lawyers when the divorce proceedings started getting serious. Chloe was different, though. She came over alone a week later and just sat on my couch crying. She told me something that honestly broke whatever tiny piece of my heart still cared about Victoria. She said, "Dad, Mom used to laugh about you when we'd talk on the phone. She'd say things like, 'Stability looks real good when you're broke and used up.' And she told us she was coming back because her boyfriend in Los Angeles dumped her and she'd run through most of the money you two had saved." Hearing that Victoria had been openly mocking me to our children while planning her big return was somehow worse than the cheating or the theft. It was the deliberate cruelty of it that cut deep. Chloe apologized for taking her mother's side. Said she'd been manipulated and guilt-tripped into believing I was the problem, that Victoria had painted this whole picture of me as an emotionally distant workaholic who drove her away. She asked if she could be part of the baby's life, because she wanted to do better this time. Wanted to be the kind of sister and daughter who showed up for people. The court date was brutal, in the way I needed it to be. Victoria showed up with a lawyer who clearly hadn't been briefed on how bad her case actually was. They tried to argue that I'd abandoned her emotionally for years, and that's why she left. That the money she took was rightfully hers as a spouse. That I'd moved on inappropriately fast with Sarah. Eleanor destroyed that argument in about 5 minutes. She presented the timeline of Victoria's affair planning that went back almost 2 years, based on what Frank had found. The financial theft that occurred before she left. The year-long abandonment with zero contact. The judge, this no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Patricia Reed, just stared at Victoria and said, "Ma'am, you have no grounds here whatsoever. You will receive 15% of marital assets, minus the $80,000 you unlawfully withdrew. This case is closed." I watched Victoria's lawyer physically wince because he knew they'd just been destroyed. Victoria tried to get alimony, tried to claim she deserved half of everything, including my business. But Eleanor had documented that she'd been employed and capable the entire time and had left voluntarily. Judge Reed wasn't having any of it. She actually said from the bench, "You don't get to abandon your marriage for a year, steal marital funds, and then come back demanding support when your plans didn't work out." That felt like the validation I'd been needing for months. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd been carrying around this massive weight, and someone had finally cut it loose. And Sarah was waiting for me outside with Chloe. Seeing them together, my daughter and the woman who'd saved me without even trying, that's when I finally believed this new life was real. I updated my will immediately after the divorce finalized. Left everything to Sarah and the baby, with a trust fund set up for Chloe, because she'd chosen to see the truth and rebuild our relationship. Liam got nothing. Because, as Eleanor said, you're under no obligation to reward betrayal just because someone shares your DNA. Emma Grace was born on a cold morning in February. Tiny and perfect, with Sarah's eyes and dark hair, and apparently my stubbornness, according to the nurses. Holding her, I felt something I'd never experienced with Liam or Chloe. This pure, uncomplicated joy that wasn't mixed with resentment, or obligation, or fear. Sarah was an incredible mother right from the start. Patient and calm, even when Emma screamed for hours with colic. Watching her sing lullabies at 3 in the morning while I made bottles, I understood. This was what partnership actually looked like. Two people choosing each other every day, working together, instead of just existing in the same house. We got married when Emma was 3 months old. A small ceremony in my backyard, with Chloe as Sarah's maid of honor, and my business partners and some friends from the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but more genuine than my wedding to Victoria ever was. When I said my vows, I meant every single word. We ran into Victoria exactly once, at a grocery store, about 6 months after Emma was born. She looked rough, tired, older than her 50 years, pushing a cart with budget brands and generic products. She saw us. Saw Emma in the carrier strapped to my chest. And something crumbled in her expression, the realization of everything she'd thrown away landing on her all at once. She walked over slowly. "Congratulations," she said. "She's beautiful." In this small, defeated voice. I just said, "Thanks. Take care of yourself." Because I genuinely didn't feel anger anymore. Just pity for someone who'd destroyed her own life chasing a fantasy that never existed. We walked away. I didn't look back. Chloe told me later that Victoria was working 2 jobs, trying to recover financially. That she'd moved into a studio apartment across town, and talked sometimes about how she'd ruined everything. Honestly, I hope she finds peace someday. But it's not my problem anymore. Liam reached out through Chloe recently, said he wanted to meet Emma, wanted to apologize for how he'd acted. But I'm not there yet. And maybe I never will be. Sarah supports whatever I decide, because she trusts me to know what's healthy for our family, and doesn't push me to forgive before I'm ready. Emma just turned 1 last month. We had a small party in the backyard with Chloe, Sarah's family, and some friends from the neighborhood. Watching Emma smash cake all over her face while everyone laughed, I had this moment of clarity. If Victoria hadn't left, if she hadn't blown up our life, I would have died never knowing what it was like to be genuinely loved by someone who chose me every single day. I'm not grateful for the pain, or the betrayal, or the months of hell where I couldn't sleep, or eat, or function like a normal human being. But I'm grateful for where it led me. And sometimes, when Sarah and I are sitting on the porch after Emma is asleep, drinking wine and talking about nothing important, I think about that sticky note on the mirror. And I realize it was probably the best thing Victoria ever did for me. Because it set me free to find the life I was actually supposed to live. With a woman who sees me and values me. And a daughter I get to raise the right way this time around. What would you have done in my situation?